Heavenly Father, we thank you for your grace and your mercy, for your persistence in chasing after us. Thank you for your word. Your word is truth and your word is life. We give you praise that everything that we need for life and godliness is found in your word. As Rex opens his mouth, that you would fill it and that you would teach us through him with power, and that we would be edified according to your word, your presence, your power, and your goodness. We ask that you bless each of us to receive everything that you have for us. Nothing missing, nothing broken, nothing lost. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So I did write notes. For some reason, I used a pen that bleeds. So the back of my page is like legible, but it's also like blending in with the front page because I didn't think about it. But we were supposed to read Genesis 34 through 36. And it starts off in 34 where it says that Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. So she went out to see what the daughters of the land in which they were living, like how they were living, what they were doing, just scoping out the area, seeing what's what. Dinah is the second, or was it second to youngest or next to youngest, whichever phrase is. It's Joseph, then her, and then it goes up. So she is like the baby right after Joseph, but she is also, up until this point, we're told, the only daughter of Jacob. And so Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her. He took her, he slept with her, and defiled her. So defiled could mean a couple of things, but it is pretty much implied that he raped her. Now, whether it was I don't even know if you can call it a friendly rape, okay, because rape is like against the will, but it doesn't make it seem like it was one of those violent situations where it was a bunch of fighting and punching and intentional hurt outside of the act.
It is violence.
Yeah.
Rape is violence.
Oh yeah, for sure. Just it doesn't imply that it was one of those, like how it's described nowadays as rape is I don't even know how to put it. Like, anytime rape is described now, it's usually described as one of those situations where the person does it for not for the act of pleasure, but like the act of showing authority or whatever. And this may have been the case, but he raped her nonetheless. And he went to his father and saying that he wanted to make Dinah his wife. So Jacob heard about it, and his sons were in the field attending to the livestock in the field, and Jacob decided to hold his peace about the situation. And shortly after, Hamor went to Jacob to talk to him, and verse 7, it says, "And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it, and they were angry, they were grieved, and they were pretty much upset that their baby sister had been raped." Now, I don't know if when it says the sons of Jacob in these upcoming texts, if it means all 11 of them. I would assume that it means all 11. but I have no full clarification that it means all 11, and I'll explain why in just a second. But it says the sons of Jacob came, they were upset. And Hamor tries to like soften the blow of the situation and say that his son wants to make Dinah his wife, and that they give their daughters to Jacob's sons and vice versa, and pretty much become intertwined with each other, become a bigger country, become brethren in the land. And Jacob's sons, and it says this in verse 13, and the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father deceitfully, and said because he had defiled their sister. He said, we cannot do this thing to our sister, to one that is uncircumcised, for that would be a reproach to us. But in this we will consent unto you, that if you would have every male be circumcised, then we would give our daughters unto you, and vice versa. But we will not. But if you don't partake in this circumcision, then pretty much the deal's off. We're not doing any of it. None of this is going forward. So Hamor and Shechem go to the gate of the city, which the gate of the city is not necessarily a gate, but just a place that's a common area for people to go. So pretty much like a downtown spot or whatever, some place for everybody to gather in large amounts of quantity. And it says that Hamor was one of the most honorable in the house. I'm sorry, Shechem was the most honorable of the sons of Hamor in the house of Hamor, meaning that his word carried a lot of weight. So if he spoke, it was usually something that people regarded very highly. So Shechem explains the situation, minus the rape part, and pretty much tells them that, we have to be circumcised, and if we're circumcised, then we'll become one with them. They'll become one with us. Now, on KB, if you can clarify this for me, it says in verse 23, shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will dwell with us. Now, when I read this part, it felt like, to me, that he wasn't trying to be like deceitful, but he was more so saying this in a way to where it would appeal to the people or the men he's talking to go under this circumcision for what they will receive, more so than actually being a people with them.
I know at first glance it sounded deceptive to me.
Mm-hmm.
Do this because we'll have their stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I kind of read it the first couple times, and I was going through my study materials, and it doesn't mention any form of implied deceit, but even in the Bible, or at least my Bible, that shall is kind of italicized, and usually that means something, but so I don't know if it was one of those situations like a rally situation where I'm going to give you all the good bits of this part so you partake in it, or I'm just telling you what it is, how it is, and what will be if we hold up our end of the bargain. So whether he was deceitful or trying to be deceitful or trying to pull the rug from under him, it's not really understood to me, but it says that and until Hamor and Shechem, his sons, hearkened all that went out to the gate of the city, and every male was circumcised, all that went out of the gate of his city. So this is another part that kind of perplexed me. It says all that went out of the gate of the city. So I don't know if that means that every male that was present in that situation were the only ones that got circumcised, or it means that every male in that city was circumcised. The way it's written, it makes it seem like every male that was in that congregation went through the circumcision. But based off what's about to happen, it could have been every male. And it, like I said, the materials that I went over, it doesn't really clarify that either. Just kind of trying to take context clues. And it came to pass on the third day when all the men were sore. Simeon and Levi, which would be the second and third son. So it's Reuben, Simeon, and then Levi. Levi and Simeon went out to the city, took their swords, and they slew, it says, all the men, Shechem, Hamor, and then took Dinah out of Shechem's house. And now this is the part that I was referring to just not too long ago. It says the sons of Jacob came upon the city and pretty much took everything. The sheep, the donkeys, the oxen, the wealth, money, the wives, the children. They pillaged the whole city, the whole town. Now, with it being put like this, I don't know if that includes Joseph, Zebulun. I don't know if it's all of them, or I don't know if it's just like part of them. So if it's all of them, that's a little rough to read, because Joseph is a part of like all of this. But it doesn't give specific names. So I don't know if it's leading to say all of them from Reuben all the way down to Joseph. It doesn't clarify. But of course, Jacob hears about it, because where else are they going to bring all these people and all these things? They're bringing them back to where they stay, and they stay around the area that Jacob is inhabiting. So he's pretty upset about it, because he says, you pretty much made me a target for the surrounding cities. I mean, they aren't necessarily from this area, so any form of retribution is going to come upon Jacob and his house, because he is the head of all of them, because he is their father. And so it says they respond. I'm going to assume being Simeon and Levi, because these are the two that Jacob specifically is talking to in verse 30. And they said, should we just, let him deal with Dinah as if she was a harlot? And if you don't know what a harlot is a prostitute. So that makes me believe that during that time, prostitutes were also being raped. Wherever form you want to look at it, either paid rape or forcible rape. Like, rape is rape, regardless of what pro word you want to put in front of it. So Jacob's pretty upset about the whole ordeal. So when Jacob holds its peace, Jacob's pretty old at this point. Jacob's at least in his 90s, late 90s, I believe, because he was 97 when he wrestled with God. Yep, 97. So he's late 90s, if not 100 years old at this point. We don't know how old Dinah is, and we don't know how old Shechem and Hamor are. But I would assume that Shechem is grossly underage as far as Jacob. He's probably in his late teens to early 30s, just giving it a gauge based on the fact that he's sending his father to talk to Jacob, or that may be the customary term back then. But Jacob didn't say anything, and it doesn't tell us how Jacob's sons found out about the situation. But if you're in the same town with somebody that runs the town, everybody knows somebody that knows somebody else. And just based off, this is the retelling of the situation by Moses, I have to take the context clues and assume that either Dinah was probably still a virgin, so she's probably bleeding after the occurrence of the situation. And with them knowing that these people, Jacob and the house of Jacob, just moving into this area, buying the land from Shechem for 100 money, that word has to travel, if not fast enough for them to hear about it and leave the field and to come to Jacob to see what the situation is. And I feel like they were a little more upset the fact that they didn't hear it from their own father and that they had to hear it secondhand. So that kind of made the blow a little worse. One, considering that if this is the only sister they have at this moment, she is pretty young compared to them, but she is the only girl out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 children at this point. But out of this anger, out of this rage, they killed a whole city and then pillaged everything and took it back for them. So one miscalculated act on Shechem's part, out of selfishness, which he probably felt wouldn't have hurt anybody, caused the death of him, his father, and all the men in his city/village. So it just shows you that even the smallest thing to you could be the biggest thing to somebody else. So the less you respect somebody else, like, it could have grave devastation for you, and not only for you, but for people who weren't even involved in the situation. Now, did they go overboard in killing everybody? Yeah, because everybody wasn't involved. But in their right, they're probably thinking that he is the prince of the land. So if he goes, then everybody else has to go, because there might be some form of retaliation, as Jacob stated. But Jacob was referring to the people outside the land, because obviously everybody in that land is dead besides them and the women and the children that they took. And based off of what they said, they weren't going to allow their sister to be dealt that way, really by anyone, it seems. So we go to chapter 35, and God says to Jacob, "Arise and go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make an altar until God that appeared before you when you fled from your brother Esau." Then Jacob said to his household and to all that were with him, "Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went." And they gave Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. So the study materials was alluding that this may have been the same tree in Shechem that Abraham had resided by long past time. But this means that Jacob probably also came to the realization during this situation or slightly before that Rachel did in fact steal her dad's idol. But this also implies that Jacob doesn't want anything coming in between God's grace and them. So anything that's going to cause them to stray away, he wants to just be rid of it from the get-go. Clean up, wash up, change your garments, be free of all that old, and let's travel towards this new situation. But also during this same time, God had already told Jacob that he was going to be with him. So this kind of puts his fear in a understandable place from a human perspective, but it's also misguided because God already told him that he was going to be with him. And so they journeyed, and it says the terror of God was upon the cities that were around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. So they were pretty much being able to travel around without anyone bothering them. So the fear that Jacob had about all that was going to happen to him because of what his two sons had done was alleviated. And so they get to Bethel, which was previously called Luz, and he built an altar there, and he called it El Bethel because God was there. They appeared to him when he fled from his brother. And then it tells us that Deborah, Rebecca's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak tree. And that's really the only thing it ever says about Deborah. And then shortly after, Jacob makes another altar in Bethel and does an offering to God for it. But then Rachel is in labor again during the travel, and she dies during birth or after birth, and she names the son Ben-Oni, which means son of my sorrows, but Jacob changed his name to Benjamin. So this is the second child of Rachel, and it was the last two that Jacob had received, Joseph being the first and Benjamin being the latter. And then after that, it gives us a little peek into the type of person that Reuben either was or was becoming. And verse 22, and it said, and it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard about it. And then it just kind of leaves it there. But that's going to pop up again, so just keep that in mind. Now, Bilhah was the first maid servant, I believe. Let me double check that real quick.
I think you're right.
I don't remember the second one. Rachel. Rachel, so she puts Sarah, gives Jacob, Bilhah. Nope, Bilhah is the second one. Zilpah, I think, is the first one.
That's right.
Okay. So he slept with Rachel's maidservant, and Rachel is gone at this point. So Reuben has disgraced his father at this point, Reuben being the oldest, and then Simeon and Levi by killing every man in that city. So the three oldest have gone against their father in some form or fashion at this point. So they make it to Isaac in the land of Mamre, the city of Arbar, which is Hebron, which is where Abraham is from, or was from. And Isaac is there, but Isaac is passing, and he does pass. And when he passed, he is 180 years old. And it says Isaac gave up the ghost, which means his spirit left him, and he died, and gathered unto his people, being old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So we know that Esau at this point had already gone his separate ways from Jacob after they had reconvened and was able to catch up. And the same way that Isaac and Ishmael came back together when Abraham died, we have the same situation where Jacob and Esau come back together for the death of their father. So it's like a full circle family reunion type of thing. And chapter 36 is, and I have to write all these names on a bigger sheet of paper, so I didn't do it, but I didn't do it yet anyway. But it just gives the genealogy of Esau, and it runs down the Edomites and explains all those people really just coming to fruition of him getting his nation, like the angel of God told Rebecca that two nations were going to be, that two nations were inside of her. One nation being Esau, Edomites, then the other nation being Jacob, Israel. And the study notes gives a little inside information on that, as far as these are supposed to be like two nations that would get along because they are from the same womb, but Israelites and the Edomites have a lot of tension between them throughout the history of the Bible. And so it says. And I obviously haven't read all the Bible yet, so I don't know exactly what points that happens. But I'm sure we'll see it here shortly, if not sooner than later. So with that is really much all I had. But what I got from 34 through 36 is that there's a lot of I wouldn't say mistrust, but there's a lot of wrong being done. A lot of people going about things their own way. And I don't know how you really translate giving yourself control over 11 different children at this point, while making sure everything's taken care of in an old age, while making sure that all these priorities, these respectable acts, respectable deeds need to be done via your children that are from 4 different women. And I feel like a lot of the things that Reuben, Simeon, and Levi did in these situations is because of the incomplete whole of the family. It's a complete family, but it's broken up into 4 different parts. And it's already been expressed that Jacob loved Rachel more than the others, Leah specifically, the older sister. So with that being in mind, I can't imagine that that family dynamic was a fully happy one. And there's not really anything that tells us much about the family dynamic outside of the things that are being done, like these small things that, well, they're not small, but small things in text that are being done, which end up being huge things. I don't necessarily know why God made Jacob leave that land at that point. I would assume it had to do with Simeon and Levi killing so many people, and that causes not so much destruction, but distress around the area. And I'm not saying it's hard for God to do anything, but when you do something outside of what you're supposed to be doing, it kind of makes it difficult for you. And like, sin has to be paid for. So if you just go and kill a bunch of people because you were upset because something happened to somebody you cared about, you still have to pay for the things that you did. Now, Jacob didn't kill anybody, and he didn't tell anybody to kill anybody at least from the text. And based off his response of the situation, he didn't do it. Either or. But just like Shechem paid with his life and the life of every other man in that town, Jacob now has to move for the sins of his sons. And then in that process, another one of his sons sleeps with his mother's maidservant. Now, I don't know how old Bilhah was, but I do know she was older than Reuben. And I would assume she was highly older than Reuben. But there's no way for me to really confirm that. But that just shows kind of like a lack of respect for your father. His father in that regard. So it just shows how kind of broken that family dynamic is. And within the next 3 chapters, we're gonna see Joseph go through his stint with his brothers, which adds to the picture of that family dynamic kind of being a little shattered, a little broken. And at that point, like, Joseph really doesn't have anybody outside of Jacob. And I don't even know if his relationship with Benjamin is really that good, because he was just kind of born. So I don't really know what that really looks like, to lose your mom, who was your father's favorite wife, and you have all these older brothers and an older sister, and now a younger brother, and you kind of just wandering, trying to figure things out. But this is these chapters kind of show like the humanity of all the people that a lot of people that read the Bible call their heroes. And I was either telling Hope or I was telling NKB, I can't remember because it was a while ago, how it's like, this is the parts of the Bible that people skip over when they're teaching. They don't talk about like how they don't go into detail of how Abraham slept with Hagar on the behest of Sarah. And they don't talk about how all these people were slaughtered in this city. They don't talk about how Reuben slept with Bilhah. They don't talk about like the humanity side of all these people. They sometimes make it sound like Abraham was Like he never made a mistake, or Jacob never made a mistake, or Isaac never made a mistake. So for the aspect of a person that's trying to get to know God or trying to understand like God's character, when you eliminate all these faults of these people, it kind of gives you an unattainable image, where if you think that the only thing Abraham did was give birth to Isaac, and he went to sacrifice him to God and God stopped him, then you're going to have this photo of Abraham just being like this perfect father that never dropped the ball at any given time. When we saw traveling through this situation that there was a whole lot of things that Abraham struggled with. He struggled with doubt, and he didn't know if like God was really going to give him the child, Isaac. And then Isaac struggled with stuff, but Isaac is compared to Jacob and Abraham, Isaac's kind of like not the least of these, but he definitely a little tame compared to the other two. And Jacob had a hard life. Some of that caused by himself, and then some of that caused by others. And as we're seeing, like his life is it's not continuously getting harder, but he is going through some of the same things as his father and his grandfather, just having to deal with that complex situation of life, moving around, taking care of so many different people, being the head of the household. And at this point, I don't know how well the relationship between Leah and Jacob are. But if Rachel died, and that's who he cared for the most, I would assume, only having one wife, like who does he really confide like his real true feelings into? Oh. Hello. Hi. It's my mom. So with that, like it's a little difficult for me to understand. Well, it's easy for me to understand, but difficult for me to put myself in those shoes, because I don't want anything to happen to Hope, but like if Hope were to be taken from me, like there's things about me that Hope knows that my mom doesn't know. And if Rachel's gone, and the Bible expresses that Rachel was his favorite, there is bound to be things that only she knew that Leah didn't know. And I just don't see Jacob being that intimate with Zilpah and Bilhah, because they're not his wives. They're just women he slept with. So that's a heavy burden. And when or at least for me, when I'm reading the Bible, I try to put myself in these people's situations so I can understand that aspect of what it was like to be able to actually hear from God, but still go through these hard situations. Like, it's easy for me to look at them and say, well, God was talking to them and he told them directly, like, I'm here for you. I'm here. I'm going to do this for you. This is going to happen. It's easy for me to say, like, okay, well, they had direct contact. Like, why are they making all these mistakes? But that was due to the way that I had received a lot of teachings in my early years. A lot of these people were preached to me as being not so much greater than they are, but made to appear like they didn't make mistakes, or they were faultless. Like, the only person that I ever heard that made a mistake growing up to my recollection was Judas, Paul, which was Saul, David whenever he slept with Bathsheba, and Jonah. Everybody else, they kind of painted in this image of, oh, well, Elijah did this, and he was just afraid of Jezebel, but his fear was understandable. Like, I get that. Like, but these context clues that shows you that these people had real emotions that they had to filter through. Like, have I been in situations where I wanted to attack people for what they did to my siblings? Yes. Have I done it? No. But it was because I was asked not to. If it was left up to me and my own devices, would I have done something? Probably. But they killed a whole town for their sister. And I can't honestly say that Shechem didn't deserve some form of punishment for sleeping with someone against their will, especially in a time where, like, women had little to no rights. I mean, it's wrong regardless, but it's just hard to conceptualize. And with everything that Jacob had been through up until this point, the fact that he was able to hold his peace, to hold his tongue, to compose himself, because I know he was angry. It's his only daughter, at least from what the text shows us, and he's an elderly man. Granted, from the sound of it, like, these elderly men back then were still pretty strong. But I'm sure Jacob wanted some form of penance to be handed out. But he didn't act according to his own will and his own wants and his own desires. And it doesn't tell us that he talked to his sons about the situation, but being as I have been a part of some of these similar situations, and also being talked to by the party involved, or at least someone related to the party, I can't see a world where they're all living in the same proximity of the same area, and he doesn't express to them how he feels about the situation. But with everything he's been through, from, the dispute with his brother, working under his uncle under those what he considered poor conditions, being tricked, wrestling with, I don't know if it was the angel of God or God himself. Like, he has that wisdom to know that I can't just act out on this situation by myself. I've done this too many times, and every time I've done that, it led to something that I don't want to deal with. And I think this is the coin we're supposed to inspect. Like, there's a time and a place for everything, and then sometimes, 9 times out of 10, all the time, well, actually, anytime you take things into your own hand, more people are going to pay for it than just the people that you want to be involved with it. Anytime you go against the greater knowledge of God and think that, well, I can do this, and I can get my revenge, I can vent, I can do whatever, and everything will be all right afterwards. Even if God didn't intervene and he just let it be, Like, once the revenge is dealt out, once you get everything that you said that you wanted to get, like, the fact that your sister was defiled doesn't change. So you're never going to forget that. And even if you do, some part of you is always going to hold on to it because you don't have the power to change it. So yeah, Shechem, Hamor, the men are dead. But Dinah still has to live with that for the rest of her life. Sure, it won't happen to her again via these people, but now she probably has this whole head on the swivel type thing where she's like, who can I trust that's a man? Because this happened to me, and all I did was go out to see what was going on in the land that I was living in. You can't. So Simeon and Levi and all her brothers, sure, they dealt with the problem. One problem being Shechem. But the other problem could be a spider web of issues. Dinah might blame herself. Dinah may feel like she was the reason. Dinah may feel like all men are like that at that point. There's just so many things that Shechem and Hamor and all these people being killed doesn't solve. Sure, it solves the physical aspect of the problem, but the emotional aspect, the spiritual aspect, that's not something that a human can fix. I can't, me physically as a person, I can't look into somebody else's situation, regardless if it was good or bad, and tell them how they should feel about the situation. Well, I can, but it's not going to help anything. And understanding to the best of my abilities people's pain and people's dissatisfaction with certain situations usually goes a longer way than just standard practices. So
I think you're on mute. We can't hear anything you're saying.
I hear.
Well, that's my brother on the screen.
Oh.
You've been on mute. We couldn't hear anything you were saying.
Can you put down?
Yes.
We can't see your whole. Can't see nothing.
Hey. How are you?
Nice and warm down there, I bet.
Open it up.
Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, just keeping in mind that you can't ever really understand the pain of somebody else and the pain that somebody else went through. You can understand to the best of your abilities, but trying to change things by your own right never really helps anybody. And I think Jacob's response to what they did to those men shows a lot in that. And it also shows that revenge is never the answer. And killing people is definitely never the answer. So just, even when you are a part of situations where you want to act out in revenge or anger, this is a story that you can lean back on and say, like, okay, let me just take a second, let me breathe, let me get myself together, let me compose myself to understand that this is bigger than me, and I need to let God handle this and not try to put this within my own grasp of my own situation, in my own hands. Because things are going to happen. Things are always going to happen that are always going to be out of our control. But if God was for them way back then, and he doesn't change, then the same God that was back there with them is the same God that's with us now. And if we can go, if it comes to us, then God will bring us through it. And that's just something I've had to learn the hard way myself, not to the extreme of this, but that, your own way is just gonna not only cause problems for you, but cause problems for people that aren't even involved in the situation. And that every decision that you make counts. Every thought, every move, everything matters. Even the things you think don't matter very much. And that's all I had. Like I said, next week is when Joseph's stuff starts to kick up, and that's what, 37 through 39. All these pins in this house, and I can't find one. All right. With that being said, did anybody have anything that they wanted to add or clarify, or just anything that stuck out to you?
I have just a quick note about Esau and Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it when you were talking about what the Lord told their mother.
Mm-hmm.
The strife, the two nations.
Yes, ma'am.
When Israel left Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
They requested to go through the edges of Edom. And Moses said, "We won't take anything. We just ask for permission to go around."
Mm-hmm.
And Edom attacked them viciously.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I can't remember where it is where the Lord spoke judgment against Edom because of how they treated Israel when they came out of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember exactly when Edom ceased to be because of their mistreatment of Israel.
Mm-hmm. I had just started listening to that. I think it's in Deuteronomy. I can't say. Yeah. And I think I was listening to that this morning where it was talking about how they were going through or trying to go through Edom and they wouldn't give them passage. So yeah, that also that answered one of my questions that I had when I was younger. I would ask the people in church, I said, why would we read the Old Testament if the New Testament is supposedly what we're following? And going through the Old Testament, specifically Genesis, and listening to all these other Old Testament books while I'm at work, like you see so much stuff that happens now that happened way back then, where like Jerusalem's in the middle of all of their enemies. And then when you start to see how all these nations and all these places are now and how much they hate certain other places, and then you go back into the Old Testament and see how some of these places hated other nations because of certain situations, it's like the same song just keeps being sung with new words that all mean the same thing. But then you realize, like, all these people come from the same people. Like, we were watching a show called SWAT on Netflix. And it's the SWAT team and the dynamic. There's I think she's Hispanic. There's I don't know if he's Asian. Well, I guess all Koreans are Asian, but more specifically, I don't know what form of Asian he is. There's a white guy that speaks Korean. There's a white guy that speaks French, and like this dynamic And Hope was talking about some French stuff the other day, and I dabble in Latin, and just like being able to point out things in different languages or different cultures, like just shows you like how much everything's connected, even though it's supposed to appear different. Like a smile in any country means the same thing. Like if you see somebody crying in any form of language, you know that it's probably pain involved. So it's like, what's that saying? The more things change, the more things stay the same. There was, I can't pull it up, but there was, I don't know if it's true or not, because I don't, can I see your phone? I think there's a city in Russia called Georgia. Is there a...
Isn't that a country?
I think it is. I'm checking it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is. Which is, there you go, thank you. Which is wild because Memphis is a city or a place in Egypt. And in Memphis, there's, like I told you guys, that pyramid that's for Amun-Ra. And we were watching that show and they said something about Georgia, and this woman was from Russia. And I meant to look it up to see if there was actually a place in Russia named Georgia, and it is. So now I got to look into why we have a state called Georgia and there's a country named Georgia in Russia. But Russia's also supposed to be like one of the enemies of the United States. Like enemy, ally, back and forth or whatever. And there's no coincidence that like America's animal is an eagle, China is a dragon, and all these other things. So it's just like so many things that like are in our face every day that mean so much, but are, I won't say never talked about, but rarely talked about. I got on YouTube this morning and yesterday just to see what would pop up. And it's just a bunch of the same stuff over and over and over again on repeat. Everybody's trying to be important. Everybody's trying to be famous. Everybody's trying to be like the next big whatever. But at the end of the video, it's like, if you want to help support the channel, you can send money here or get a subscription here. But it's like, it's never any human to human information. It's whatever I can give you to make you want to buy a subscription or sell you something. Like, all of humanity is being sucked out at every avenue of really everything. Like, you can look at it now, like when COVID happened, a lot of people stopped going to church. So a lot of churches start doing the online services. Well, with that, a lot of people still continue to stop going to church because they still had these online services. Now, it's good that they have the services during that aspect, but because of that, like, it taught people that you don't have to be around people to quote unquote get what you need. But you can't really get emotion as well as you need to, or interaction from a screen. And they have all these events now that if you can't attend physically, you can pay the same amount that you would to attend physically to watch it live on your TV or cell phone or whatever. So like everything that used to be about connection and humanity is just all becoming digitized. And like, even if you search something on Google, the first answer that comes up is usually like an AI generated answer. So now you don't even have like a real typed out human response. It's all AI generated. So pretty soon it's going to be hard to really connect with anything because everything's going to be based off an algorithm. And where people used to you had to be talented to be famous. Now you just have to do something stupid and you're famous or infamous. So it's just wild. I don't know if you all have seen the fires that's been going on in California. So when I was doing research, when I was in high school, maybe junior high, there was this guy talking about how they build power lines in California. And me and Hope have been like 3 or 4 times to California, I think together or separately. And they said that they build power lines next to trees. So if the wind blows too hard, it takes nothing for the tree to catch on fire because it hardly rains in some areas in California. But allegedly there's this plan that these politicians had, some form of route. And apparently the fires that are happening now are following the same path of that plan. They said some guy in New York, some Japanese guy just pled guilty to having, was it nuclear weapons in New York? So yeah, it's it's one of those things where like you used to see on movies like Enemy of the State or Deja Vu with Denzel Washington, all these military tactics and all these things that would happen and nobody would believe it because it sounds insane. So like all this stuff is starting to happen now. And you can even go back to the swine flu where it just popped out of nowhere, or the guy that got tuberculosis that was supposedly killing people on the airplane, but then like they just stopped covering it. It's wild. So it's like all the stuff that they build on purpose. And then everything that happens, it's like they have like these 100-year plans. And then they just follow them out to the T. And whenever it's close for the plan to end, they like just start planning for whatever else. So like the same people that were going against the people of Israel back then are probably the same people, bloodline-wise, that are doing all these human trafficking, these massacres. These probably the same people that pay P. Diddy and all these other people and all these rappers and other things. Because there's no way that like the same message, prostitution, money, sex, all this other stuff that was going on back then should still be going on if the people in charge don't follow the same playbook from the people way back when. It doesn't make sense. And now you have so many people that claim Christianity just to get money from people in the church, just to fund their own initiatives. So yeah, it's wild. And like now, I know in the trading card game space, you can get banned from the game if you're playing. Let's say I'm playing he's obviously a dude, but he's like wearing a dress, but he wants to be called she. If I don't call that person she, they'll kick me out of the event. Yeah. So it's like it's getting to the point where there's constitutional rights, but they don't matter. And once it gets to the point where none of that stuff matters, then anybody that disagrees with anything is either going to get killed or thrown in jail. And it doesn't appear like it's going to be too far off from that point, because you say anything sensible in any form of media, social media, or interaction, and like people are ready to fight you. So that's all I had Did anybody else have anything? All right, so next week is gonna be what, 37 through 39.
Yeah.
All right, Ma, unmute yourself. Ma. Okay. I'll just pray for us then. All right, God, thank you for this day. Thank you for bringing us safely through 2025. I just ask that this be the year of guidance, the year of preparation, and the year of healing. There's just so many things that need to be fixed in this world. And as long as we're still breathing, that just means that there's opportunity for you to use us to be the change in this world. Just like the situation with Jacob and his children going about their own way, I just ask that you keep us on the path of righteousness, because it's so easy to let one situation return us back to the people that we used to be. It's so easy to go back to what feels better than what actually is better. Just ask that you continue to cover us in the blood of Jesus. Forgive us of all our trespasses, our sins, and our iniquities. And just don't let us fall to the wayside. And help us forgive those people who do damage to us on purpose and try to make us regress into a less person than who you say we are. Just ask that you never leave us or forsake us like you said you would never do. And just whenever people try to curse us, that we give them words of encouragement, bless them. And, so you build up our tolerance for the pain, so that in horrible situations we can press through and just be the soldiers that you put us on this planet to be. In the holy name of Jesus, amen.